Story 1. The shadow count. The head count didn't match at 3:17 a.m., and I knew someone was about to die. 47 inmates in C block, 48 shadows on the wall. I'd counted 3 times, my flashlight beam trembling across each cell, my breath fogging in air that shouldn't have been cold in July. Every inmate was accounted for, sleeping or pretending to sleep in their bunks. But that extra shadow in cell 14 stood upright, impossibly tall, its edges bleeding into the concrete like ink in water. My name is Marcus Webb, and I'd been working at Blackwater Correctional for 11 years when the shadow count started. They trained us for riots, for stabbings, for inmates who'd swallowed razor blades or fashioned weapons from toothbrushes. They never trained us for what happened when reality stopped following the rules. Cell 14 housed Raymond Kovach, a soft-spoken man doing 25 to life. For a murder he claimed his reflection committed. Most guards thought he was playing the insanity angle for appeal purposes. I'd listened to his intake interview recording once, heard him describe in perfect detail how he'd watched himself in the bathroom mirror strangle his wife while his real hands hung limp at his sides, how he'd screamed and beaten against the glass, but the thing wearing his face just smiled and squeezed harder. The shadow in his cell wasn't his. Wrong proportions entirely. Kovach was 5'7", stocky build. This shadow stretched 7 feet tall at least, with arms that hung past where knees should be. I could see Kovach in his bunk, covers pulled up to his chin, eyes squeezed shut so hard his whole face trembled. He was whispering something, counting backwards from 100, over and over, his voice barely audible through the bars. "Control, this is Webb on C block," I radioed, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need..." The radio crackled, then played back my own voice from 10 seconds ago. The head count didn't match at 3:17 a.m., and I knew someone was about to die. Then static. Then breathing that wasn't mine. The shadow moved, not the fluid motion of normal shadows when light sources shift, but a stuttering, frame-skipping lurch like corrupted video footage. One instant, it stood beside Kovach's bunk. The next, it pressed against the cell bars, its head cocked at an angle that would have snapped a human neck. No face, no features. Just absolute darkness that hurt to look at directly, like staring at the sun in reverse. I stepped back. My flashlight flickered. Every light in C block flickered in sequence, a wave of strobing darkness rolling down the corridor from cell to cell. In those brief moments of blackness, I heard something that still wakes me up screaming. Dozens of voices, all the inmates in C block, speaking in perfect unison. 48, 48, 48. When the light stabilized, cell 14 was empty. Kovach was gone. The shadow was gone. The blanket on. His bunk lay perfectly smooth, tucked with hospital corners, not a wrinkle. His property box sat on the floor, empty. The concrete walls showed no cracks, no damage. The cell door remained locked, key still on my belt. I radioed again. This time it worked. They found Kovach 3 days later. He'd somehow gotten into the old execution chamber that had been sealed since 1998, buried behind 3 feet of cinder block and steel plating we'd installed during renovations. No one could explain how he'd accessed it. The door required 2 separate keys, held by different administrators, both of which were accounted for in the secure key locker. No structural damage, no tunnel, no logical point of entry. He was sitting in the electric chair, restraints fastened around his wrists and ankles, the metal helmet placed on his head. Dead for approximately 72 hours, according to the coroner, though he'd been seen alive after that timeline didn't make sense. The cause of death was what broke 3 investigators and sent 2 guards into early retirement. Electrical burns covering 90% of his body, the pattern consistent with high-voltage electrocution. The chair hadn't been functional in 28 years. The power had been permanently disconnected, the wiring stripped out. The building inspector confirmed no possible electrical source. But someone had written on the chamber wall in what forensics confirmed was Kovach's blood. The letters 3 feet tall. 48 saw. 48 remember. The shadow counts continued. Every third night, 3 a.m. exactly, one extra shadow. Always in a different cell. We started keeping logs. Unofficial ones we hid from administration because who would believe us? The pattern was sickeningly consistent. Whichever cell showed the extra shadow, that inmate would vanish within 72 hours. We'd find them eventually, always in impossible locations within the prison. Always dead in ways that defied explanation. Cell 22. Marcus Wright, in for armed robbery. The shadow appeared on a Tuesday. Friday morning, we found him inside the water tower, which could only be accessed by a locked external ladder. He'd drowned. The water contained salt at ocean-level salinity, though the tower held treated freshwater. His lungs were full of sand, beach sand, the lab report specified, with microscopic shells and fragments of coral. The nearest ocean was 430 miles away. Cell 6. Thomas Hernandez, serving life for murder. Shadow on Saturday. Tuesday, he turned up sealed inside the prison chapel's concrete altar, which had been poured solid in 1963. They had to jackhammer it open. He'd suffocated. His fingers were worn to bone from clawing. But the concrete showed no internal scratches, no signs of hollow space until they broke through. The impossible physics made the chaplain resign. Cell 31. David Park, awaiting trial. Shadow on Thursday. Sunday, he appeared in the ceiling. His body somehow fused into the concrete and rebar 2 floors above his cell. Not buried in it, fused. The structural engineer who examined it vomited and left. Parts of Park's skeleton had merged with the steel reinforcement bars at a molecular level. He'd been alive during the process. His screams were found recorded on the security system. But the audio shouldn't have been possible. His lungs were full of concrete. I started staying awake those nights, watching C Block from 3 a.m. to dawn. Other guards thought I'd cracked, that the stress had gotten to me. Maybe it had. But I needed to understand. I needed to see what happened during the vanishing moment. On October 14th, 2023, I got my answer. The shadow appeared in cell 19, belonging to an inmate named Christopher Ellis, a quiet kid doing 5 years for vehicular manslaughter. Good behavior. Took college courses, didn't deserve whatever was coming. I watched the shadow form at 3:17 exactly. This time I didn't look away. I forced myself to stare directly at it, ignoring the pain building behind my eyes, the sensation of cold fingers pressing into my brain. The shadow peeled away from the wall. That's the only way to describe it. It simply detached from the 2-dimensional surface and became 3-dimensional, stepping into physical space with a sound like tearing fabric. It walked to Ellis's bunk. He was awake, frozen in terror, unable to scream. The shadow reached down with those 2 long arms and touched his face. Where it made contact, Ellis began to fade. Not disappear, fade. Like someone was slowly erasing him from reality, starting with his skin, then muscle, then bone, each layer becoming transparent before vanishing entirely. He was screaming silently, his mouth open wide, but no sound emerged. The process took 47 seconds. I know because I counted, because counting was the only thing keeping me from running or going insane. When Ellis was completely gone, the shadow turned to face me. I saw myself reflected in it, but wrong. My reflection smiled while I trembled in horror. My reflection waved while my hands gripped the corridor railing. Then the shadow collapsed back into 2 dimensions and disappeared. The cell stood empty. Ellis's belongings remained. His books, his letters from home, his drawings of birds he'd been working on for an art class. All there. Just not him. We found Ellis 4 days later, not 3. He was inside the prison's cornerstone, a massive granite block laid in 1896 and never moved. They had to bring in specialized equipment to scan it, then carefully dismantle the historical structure. Ellis was curled in fetal position in a hollow space that geological surveys confirmed had never existed. The granite had been solid, one continuous piece, verified by multiple independent assessments during a historical survey just 6 months prior. He'd aged. That was the detail that made the medical examiner request immediate psychiatric leave. Ellis was 23 when he vanished. The body we extracted was approximately 60 years old. Dental records confirmed identity. DNA confirmed identity. But his body showed 6 decades of decay, starvation, and dehydration. He'd been alive in there, trapped in darkness, aging at a rate that shouldn't have been physically possible. His fingernails were gone, worn away to nothing. The inside of the granite showed scratches, thousands upon thousands of scratches, words carved in microscopic letters covering every inch of his prison. We extracted samples. Forensic linguistics analyzed them. The same phrase, repeated roughly 500,000 times. 48, saw me, 48, remember me, 48 took me. I requested transfer after that. Was denied. Personnel were already stretched thin, and too many guards had quit or taken medical leave. C Block needed experienced staff. I started. Drinking to sleep, stopped sleeping entirely, then started drinking to function. The shadow counts continued their pattern, 1 every 3rd night, 3 a.m. precisely. But something changed after Ellis. The number changed. Not 48 anymore. 49 shadows. 1 inmate had been added to the count, except no new prisoner had arrived. I walked the block during daytime, counting cells, counting inmates. 47 cells, 47 prisoners, but 49 shadows when night fell. Cell 14, where this started, remained empty after Kovac. We'd sealed it, declared it maintenance space, refused to house anyone there. But sometimes, during afternoon rounds, I'd see movement inside. A shape sitting on the bunk that wasn't there. A silhouette standing in the corner that vanished when I looked directly at it. The chaplain told me, before he quit, that he'd researched the prison's history. Blackwater Correctional was built on the site of a previous prison that burned in 1922. 48 inmates died in that fire, trapped in their cells when the key holder fled. Their bodies were never properly buried. The cornerstone of the new prison, the granite block where we found Ellis, had been placed directly over the old cell block's foundation. Construction records from 1896 mentioned unusual difficulties. Workers reported tools vanishing, shadows that moved independently of light sources. 3 construction workers died in accidents the safety inspector called physically improbable. The project was delayed 18 months beyond schedule. I started seeing the extra shadows during daytime. Just brief flashes. A figure standing at the end of the corridor that shouldn't be there. An inmate walking past who matched no one on the roster. They never looked quite right. Their proportions were slightly off. Their movements too smooth or too jerky. And their eyes, when I caught glimpses, reflected no light at all. The warden, ordered psychiatric evaluations for all C Block staff. 7 of us. 5 failed. I barely passed by, lying through every question, hiding the insomnia, the nightmares, the way I'd started seeing shadows move in my peripheral vision everywhere, not just the prison. At home, in my car, following me to the grocery store. On December 3rd, I worked the night shift. 3 a.m. approached. I stood in the corridor, flashlight ready, counting inmates. 47 present. I counted shadows. 51. The number had grown again. 4 extra shadows, standing in 4 different cells, all perfectly still, all watching me with the attention of predators who'd learned patience over a century. My radio crackled. Every guard's radio on every frequency crackled simultaneously. Then 48 voices spoke in unison, inmates and guards and something else underneath, something vast and hungry. 52, 52, 52. I looked down at the corridor floor. The fluorescent lights cast my shadow sharp and clear against the concrete. Except my shadow stood facing the wrong direction. It waved at me. I didn't wave back. I couldn't move. I watched my shadow detach from the floor and walk away, leaving me standing under the lights, casting no darkness at all. They found me 3 days later. I don't remember where. They won't tell me where. I woke up in a psychiatric facility, restrained to a bed, missing 72 hours of memory. The doctors speak in soft tones. They don't ask me questions anymore. They just watch me with that clinical concern that means they've already decided I'm gone. But I know the truth. I'm not in the facility. I'm still in C Block. I'm the 52nd shadow. I'm still there during the counts, standing in a cell that doesn't exist, waiting for 3 a.m. when the guards walk past and see one too many. I'm the one who makes the numbers wrong. And every night, at 3:17 exactly, I reach through the walls and touch someone's face, and the number grows by 1. Story 2. The Transfer Protocol. The intake form listed the prisoner's name as Aaron Finch, but the photograph showed no face, just a flesh-colored blur where features should have been, like someone had smudged wet paint across the image. Control sent him to D Block anyway, with a note that read, "Processed normally. Ignore documentation errors." I'd been processing transfers at Redwood Correctional for 8 years. I'd never seen an error quite like that. He arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in chains, escorted by 2 U.S. Marshals who wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. The transport vehicle was a reinforced truck I'd never seen in our fleet, painted flat black with no department markings. When they opened the rear doors, cold air poured out despite the 90-degree heat, visible condensation rolling across the parking lot like morning fog. Finch stepped down smoothly. Too smoothly, his movements fluid in a way that made my stomach clench. He was maybe 6 feet tall, slim build, wearing standard orange transport coveralls. His face looked normal at first glance. Brown hair, pale skin, average features. But when I tried to focus on his eyes, my vision slipped sideways like trying to grab water. I'd look directly at him and somehow end up staring at his shoulder or the wall behind him. "Special transfer," the lead marshal said, handing me a sealed envelope. Red wax seal, no postage, no return address. Follow the protocol exactly. No deviations, no exceptions. His hand shook when he gave it to me. Slight tremor, but visible. Marshals don't shake. "What protocol?" I asked. "We weren't notified of any special procedures." "You were, 3 weeks ago. Check your secure files under classification X77. He was already backing toward the truck, his partner moving even faster. "Don't open that envelope until you're alone. Don't discuss the contents with anyone. Don't deviate from the instructions." They were gone in 40 seconds, the truck's engine roaring to life before the rear doors fully closed. I stood in the intake bay with a prisoner who shouldn't exist and an envelope that felt wrong in my hands. Too cold, too heavy. The paper texture somehow oily despite being completely dry. Finch smiled at me. At least I think he smiled. The expression existed in my peripheral vision, but vanished when I looked directly at his mouth. "You can call me Aaron," he said. His voice came from slightly left of where he stood, a half-second delay, like bad audio sync. "I'm going to be here for quite a while." "How long's your sentence?" I asked, going through the motions, leading him through the metal detector. It didn't beep despite his chains. The screen showed only empty air where his body should have registered. "I'm not sure time works the same way for me," he said conversationally. "What year is it?" 2024. Yes, that's right. This is the 6th time I've arrived in 2024, or maybe the 7th. The iterations blur together after a while. I stopped walking. "What?" "Nothing. Disregard that. First day confusion." But he was still smiling that smile I couldn't see properly, and something in his tone made my skin crawl. I processed him mechanically. Fingerprints that showed loops and whirls in patterns that spiraled impossible directions, photographs that came out blurred no matter what settings the camera used, DNA swabs that the machine rejected with error codes I'd never encountered. The system assigned him cell D17. I walked him to D block, unlocked the cell, watched him step inside. "You're going to open that envelope tonight," he said as I locked the door. "Around midnight. You won't be able to help yourself? When you do, remember, the protocol exists for your protection, not mine. Follow every instruction exactly, or you'll end up like Harrison." "Who's Harrison?" "You are, or you were, or you will be. Time is more flexible than you think, Officer Harrison Webb." He settled onto his bunk, lying down in one smooth motion. "Don't worry. Most versions of you survive the first week." "My name isn't Harrison. It's Marcus. Marcus Webb." I told him so. "Not yet," Finch said, closing his eyes. At least, I think he closed them. "But you will be. Names are just as flexible as time when you're dealing with Protocol X77. I left him there and tried to continue my shift normally. Failed. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I pulled the personnel file on myself, confirming my own identity like a madman. Marcus Webb. Born 1987. Hired 2016. Married, 2 kids. I knew who I was, except the photograph in my ID badge showed someone who wasn't quite me. Same face, but the eyes were wrong. The smile was wrong, like looking at a copy that was 99% accurate, but missing some essential detail that made the difference between human and something else. I checked the secure files. Classification X77 existed. The access log showed I'd opened it 3 weeks ago, spent 47 minutes reading the contents. I had no memory of this. None. The timestamp was 3:22 a.m., and I'd never worked overnight shifts until today. The file was 473 pages long. I started reading. By page 10, I was nauseous. By page 50, I understood why the marshals had run. By page 100, I'd locked my office door and disabled the security camera. Protocol X77 dealt with temporal anomalies in human form. Prisoners who existed in multiple time streams simultaneously. Inmates who had been arrested for crimes they hadn't committed yet, or had already committed in timelines that no longer existed. The document was written in dry, bureaucratic language that somehow made the content more horrifying. Aaron Finch, or the entity using that name, Had been arrested 73 times. Always the same day. March 15th, 2024. Always the same crime. Murder of a corrections officer named Harrison Webb. Except Harrison Webb didn't exist in any federal database. No birth certificate, no social security number, no employment history. He was a ghost. But Finch kept killing him in timeline after timeline. The protocol was simple. Devastating, but simple. I had to follow a specific schedule of observations, checks, and documentation. Every day at precisely 3:22 a.m., I had to confirm Finch's location. Every day at noon, I had to speak with him for exactly 17 minutes. No more, no less. Every Friday, I had to provide him with a specific meal. Cheeseburger, no onions, extra pickles, vanilla shake. The document never explained why. It just repeated, in bold text across 3 separate pages, deviation results in temporal collapse. Previous casualties, 41 personnel. I sat in my office until 11:58 p.m., unable to leave, unable to stop reading. The file contained incident reports from other facilities where Protocol X77 had been implemented. Redacted names, redacted locations, but the outcomes were described in clinical detail. Officer Ifarinas Watersarajwaradrovers deviated from schedule at day 6. Spoke with subject for 19 minutes instead of 17. Officer Wanran ceased to exist at day 7. Personnel records showed no employment history. Family members retained no memory of individual. Apartment lease showed no previous tenant. Social security number invalid. Officer Mashur Harles had been erased from baseline reality. At midnight exactly, I opened the sealed envelope. My hands moved on their own. I watched them break the wax seal, unfold the paper inside. A single sentence, handwritten in ink that seemed to shift colors under the fluorescent lights. You became Harrison Webb 3 weeks ago. The transition completes in 6 days. Follow the protocol or cease entirely. I ran to the bathroom and vomited. When I checked my reflection in the mirror, my name tag read Harrison Webb. I looked down at my chest. Still said Marcus Webb. I looked back at the mirror. Harrison Webb. I closed my eyes, counted to 10, looked again. The name tag in the mirror flickered between both names, alternating with each heartbeat. My phone rang. I answered without thinking. My wife's voice. Harrison, you okay? You sound weird. I'm Marcus, I said. Long pause. Honey, did you hit your head? You're scaring me. Do I need to come get you? My name is Marcus Webb. Harrison Marcus Webb, yes. You go by Harrison because your dad was Marcus and it got confusing. We've been over this. Are you having a stroke? I'm calling 911. I hung up. Checked my driver's license. Harrison Marcus Webb. Checked my birth certificate in my wallet, the one I carried for some paranoid reason I couldn't remember. Harrison Marcus Webb, born 1987. I'd been Harrison all along. Marcus was the middle name I never used. Except I had memories of being Marcus. 20 years of memories. Being called Marcus at school. Introducing myself as Marcus. My wife saying I do to Marcus. My kids calling me Daddy Marcus. I had memories of being Harrison, too. The same 20 years, slightly different. Close enough to overlap, far enough to conflict. 2 lifetimes occupying the same skull. And they were merging, collapsing into each other like waves canceling out. I went to D Block at 3:22 a.m. Finch was awake, sitting upright in his bunk, staring at the wall. Or at something behind the wall, or at something beyond dimension entirely. You're adjusting well, he said without turning. Better than the last 4 iterations. They all went insane by day 2. You've made it to day 22. It's day 1, I said. You arrived today. From your perspective, yes. From mine, we've been having this conversation for 3 weeks. You've been checking on me every night at 3:22. We've had 17-minute conversations every noon. You brought me my Friday meal 6 times now. You're following the protocol perfectly, which is why you're still cohesive. Cohesive? Still mostly one person, instead of fragments scattered across collapsing timelines. He finally turned to face me, and for one terrible instant, I could see his features clearly. Too many eyes, too many mouths. Dozens of faces occupying the same space, flickering in and out of visibility. You want to know what I did to deserve this? What crime was so terrible they had to use Protocol X77? I didn't, but I asked anyway. I figured out how to exist in multiple times simultaneously. I became unstuck, fluid, capable of being everywhere and everywhen at once. The government decided that was too dangerous. So they created the protocol. They assigned me a victim, you, Harrison Webb, who doesn't exist yet but will because you're becoming him, and trapped me in a loop. I'm arrested for your murder in timelines where you haven't been born. I'm transferred to prisons to be observed by guards who are being rewritten into my designated victim. It's elegant, really. A temporal prison for a temporal crime. I'm going to stop this, I said. I'll deviate from the protocol. I'll break the loop. That's what the other 41 tried. Want to know what happens? He stood, walked to the bars, pressed his face between them. Up close, his features stabilized into something almost human, almost sympathetic. You'll cease, not die. Cease. You'll have never existed. Your children will never have been born. Your wife will have married someone else, someone named James or Robert or whoever fills the gap you leave. The timeline will heal around your absence, like water closing over a stone. Then what do? You follow the protocol. You become Harrison Webb completely. You let Marcus fade away. And in 6 days, on day 28, I'll be transferred again. And you'll go home to your wife, who's always called you Harrison, to your kids who've always known you by that name, and you'll live a normal life until March 15th, 2027, when I'll kill you in a timeline that hasn't happened yet. And the loop will start over with some other version of you in some other prison. I checked on him every night at 3:22 a.m. for 5 more days. We had our 17-minute conversations at noon. I brought him his Friday meal. Each day, Marcus faded further. I stopped recognizing myself in mirrors. My wife looked familiar but distant, like someone I'd known in childhood but hadn't seen since. My kids felt like strangers' children I was babysitting. Day 27. I stood in D block at 3:22 a.m. Finch was gone. The cell stood empty. The bars were locked. No damage, no explanation. Just empty space where a temporal anomaly in human form had been contained. I checked the logs. No transfer orders, no incident reports. Nothing. I radioed control. D17 is empty. Negative, control responded. Inmate Finch is present and accounted for. Visual confirmation required. I looked at the cell. Empty. I pulled up the security footage. The monitor showed Finch sleeping in his bunk. I looked at the cell with my eyes. Empty. I looked at the monitor. Occupied. My radio crackled. Finch's voice came through. You deviated, Harrison. You checked at 3:23, 1 minute late. That's deviation. The protocol is collapsing. I'm on time, I said, checking my watch. 3:22 exactly. Your watch is wrong. It's been wrong since day 15. You've been 1 minute off for 13 days, close enough to hold, but too far to sustain. You're fragmenting now. Can't you feel it? I could. I could feel myself splitting, branching, becoming multiple people in multiple timelines. Marcus in one, Harrison in another, other names I'd never heard in others. Each version equally real, equally unreal, all of them vibrating in the same space like overlapping images. What happens now? I asked. Now you choose? Finch said. His voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Which version survives? Which name you keep? Most people can't choose, so they fragment into nothing. But you're stronger than the others. You might make it. I closed my eyes, focused on one name. Harrison. Let Marcus drift away. Let him fade into memory. Let him become a middle name I never used. The splitting sensation slowed, stabilized. I opened my eyes. The cell was occupied. Finch lay in his bunk, sleeping peacefully. My watch read 3:22 a.m. exactly. The security feed matched reality. Everything was cohesive again. But when I checked my reflection in the polished steel mirror in the corridor, the person looking back wasn't quite me. Close, 99% accurate, but missing some essential detail. The face was mine. The name tag read Harrison Webb. But the eyes belonged to someone else. Someone named Marcus who'd existed once, but existed no longer. Finch transferred out the next day. The marshals came at dawn. Same black truck, same hurried extraction. He smiled at me as they led him away, and this time I could see his expression clearly. See you in 3 years, Harrison, he said. March 15th, 2027. Try not to be late. I went home to my wife, who'd always called me Harrison. My kids, who'd always known that name. I looked through photo albums showing a lifetime of being Harrison Marcus Webb. Middle name never used, Harrison always preferred. The photographs were real. The memories were real. But underneath them, like palimpsest, I could feel other memories bleeding through. Marcus at school, Marcus getting married, Marcus holding his newborn children. I still check the time, obsessively. 3:22 a.m. I wake up in cold sweats, counting seconds, making sure I'm not late. Noon, I catch myself rehearsing conversations, timing them to 17 minutes exactly. Fridays, I find myself craving cheeseburgers with extra pickles, even though I've always hated pickles. Or Harrison has always hated pickles. Marcus loved them. March 15th, 2027 is circled on my calendar in red ink. I don't remember circling it, but it's there. Countdown running in my head. 943 days until Aaron Finch completes the loop, until the temporal anomaly resolves, until Harrison Webb dies for a crime that hasn't been committed yet. And sometimes, late at night, I see him in my peripheral vision. Not Finch. Marcus. The version of me that ceased to exist. Standing in my hallway, looking confused, trying to figure out why his wife doesn't recognize him, why his children call him the wrong name. He's fragmenting further, spreading across timelines like cracks in glass. I want to tell him I'm sorry. Sorry I chose Harrison. Sorry I let him fade. But if I acknowledge him, if I admit he's still partially real, the protocol collapses. I cease. He ceases. Harrison ceases. All versions fragment into nothing. So I follow the protocol. I ignore the ghost of Marcus. I answer to Harrison. I live this life that's 99% mine, but missing that essential detail. And I wait for March 15th, 2027, when Finch returns and the loop closes, and maybe, finally, I'll understand what crime I committed to deserve this. Or which version of me committed it. Time is more flexible than you think. Names are too. And identity, I've learned, is the most flexible thing of all. The prison psychiatrist asks if I'm adjusting well. I tell her yes. She makes notes, nods sympathetically, prescribes sleeping pills I don't take because if I sleep through 3:22 a.m., the protocol deviates. She doesn't notice my name tag flickers sometimes, alternating between Harrison and Marcus with each breath. Or maybe she does notice. Maybe she's part of the protocol too. Maybe everyone at Redwood Correctional is part of the mechanism that keeps temporal anomalies contained. We're all waiting for March 15th, 2027. We're all counting down. And somewhere, in a facility I'll never see, in a timeline that hasn't happened yet, Aaron Finch is sitting in a cell, smiling at nothing, waiting to be transferred again, waiting to meet the next iteration of Harrison Marcus Webb, waiting to complete the loop that started when I opened that envelope and became someone else. I check the time, 3:22 a.m. I'm always on time now. I have to be. Story 3. The Clean Cell Initiative. Cell B12 had been empty for 9 months when they assigned it to the new inmate, and I knew we were sending him to die. Not die like Shank in the Showers die. Die like the 3 previous occupants who'd been found perfectly intact, but somehow hollow, their bodies showing no cause of death, their faces frozen in expressions of terminal confusion. The medical examiner kept ruling them natural causes because there was no other option that made sense. I'm Officer Sarah Chen, 12 years at Holbrook State Penitentiary, and I'd been part of the cleaning crew that processed B12 after each death. The cell was immaculate. That was the problem. Prison cells accumulate grime, scratches, stains, the archaeological layers of human occupancy. B12 was pristine. The walls were perfectly smooth concrete that never showed handprints. The floor was spotless despite never being mopped. The toilet gleamed like it had been installed that morning. The first death was Gerald Sawyer, 6 weeks into a 10-year sentence for embezzlement. Quiet guy, model inmate, no gang affiliations. He'd been found at morning count, sitting upright on his bunk, hands folded in his lap, staring at the wall. Pulse 0. Temperature normal. No trauma, no drugs in his system, no signs of struggle. The autopsy showed all organs functioning normally. At time of death, which was medically impossible. You can't have a working heart and 0 pulse. But the detail that made me start having nightmares was what they found in his stomach. 2 pounds of concrete dust. Pristine, clean concrete dust, with no biological contamination despite having been ingested. The same concrete as the cell walls, analyzed and confirmed. No abrasions in his throat or esophagus. No evidence of swallowing. The dust was just there, filling his stomach like someone had poured it in while he watched. The second death was Marcus Odom, 3 months later. Armed robbery, 4 years in. Tougher than Sawyer, more street smart, the kind who knew how to survive inside. Same result. Morning count, found sitting upright, hands folded, staring at the wall. Pulse 0, all organs normal, medically impossible. His stomach contained 3 pounds of concrete dust, slightly more than Sawyer, also pristine, also impossible. The third death was when administration started, calling it a coincidence, when they stopped investigating seriously, when they decided the cell was just unlucky but ultimately safe. Timothy Walsh, 2 weeks into a 15-year sentence for vehicular manslaughter. Family man, first-time offender, terrified of prison. They put him in B12 because it was empty and clean and what could happen 3 times in a row. They found him at morning count, sitting upright, hands folded, staring at the wall. Pulse 0, organs normal, 4 pounds of concrete dust in his stomach. The cell had been empty since then, Administration sealed the incident reports. The deaths were classified as natural causes with unusual presentations. B12 was kept off the active housing roster, listed as maintenance pending. But budget cuts meant we needed every available cell, and the warden decided 9 months was enough time for superstition to fade. The new inmate was named Dmitry Volkov, transferring from federal custody on a plea deal. Organized crime, connections, suspected of 7 murders, but pleading to conspiracy. Dangerous, calculated. The kind of prisoner you wanted isolated anyway. B block was protective custody, cameras everywhere, minimal inmate interaction. If something was going to happen, we'd see it. I was on duty when they brought him in. He looked at B12 and laughed, a short, sharp sound with no humor. "The clean cell," he said in slightly accented English. They told me about the clean cell. I thought it was legend. American prison myth. "You've heard of this cell?" I asked, surprised. "We have clean cells in Russia, in Ukraine, in Poland. Same story everywhere. Prisoner goes in clean. Prisoner comes out empty." He stepped into the cell willingly, looking around with apparent interest. "Very clean. Too clean. You can see it, yes? This cell wants to stay clean." "Wants?" "Bad English. I mean, this cell keeps itself clean. You know this. You've seen it. Why else you put dangerous Dmitry in bad luck cell?" He sat on the bunk, testing the mattress. "You hope it takes me. You hope I die like others. Then you seal cell forever. Problem solved." I didn't answer because he was right. The warden had said as much in private. 2 birds, 1 stone. Deal with a dangerous transfer and resolve the B12 situation simultaneously. Volkov settled in like he'd been there years. He organized his property with precise care, arranged his books in alphabetical order, folded his spare uniform with military precision. Then he took out a piece of chalk, contraband, but I didn't stop him, and started drawing symbols on the wall. Not gang markings, geometric patterns, intricate and deliberate, covering the concrete in white lines. "My grandmother taught me these," he said, not looking at me. "Old symbols, very old. From before Soviet Union, before Russia. From when people understood that places can have hunger, you understand? Some places hungry, they eat. That's insane. You say this, but you know. 3 people died here. All same way. All with concrete in belly. Cell eating them from inside." He finished one pattern, started another. "These symbols, they make agreement. Cell stays clean, I give it something. Small offering. It stays satisfied. Maybe it doesn't eat Dmitry." I left him there and filed an incident report about the chalk drawings. The response came back. Monitor but allow. Occupant appears to be engaging in superstitious ritual. Poses no security threat. Translation: let him draw on the walls. See what happens. What happened was nothing. First day passed. Morning count found Volkov sleeping normally, breathing normally, pulse present. He'd covered 3 walls with symbols. Second day, same result. Alive and well, adding more patterns. Third day, fourth, first week, he was thriving. Gained weight. Color improved. He seemed healthier in B12 than most inmates in regular cells, but the cell was changing. I noticed it during evening rounds. The concrete, between Volkov's symbols, looked different. Darker, not stained. Darkness that seemed to emanate from within the material itself. The patterns he'd drawn glowed faintly in low light, a phosphorescent quality that shouldn't have been possible with standard chalk. "The agreement holds," Volkov told me one evening. "I give offering every day. Concrete accepts, hunger satisfied, balance maintained." "What offering?" He held up his hands. All 10 fingertips were wrapped in makeshift bandages, tissue paper, and tape. Small piece each day. Fingernail, skin, sometimes blood. Cell is hungry for human, yes? So I give small amount. Enough to satisfy, but not enough to empty me like others. I should have stopped him. Self-harm was against regulations. But the alternative was another corpse sitting upright with concrete in his stomach. I filed it under monitoring and said nothing. Week 2. Volkov's symbols covered all 4 walls, floor to ceiling, overlapping geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. The cell had developed a smell, not filth, the opposite. Sterile cleanness, like hospital disinfectant mixed with ozone. The concrete walls sweated clear fluid that left no residue when wiped. Cell is very hungry now, Volkov told me. I give more offering. Not enough anymore. It wants full meal. It waits. Patient. Hungry things learn patience. You could request transfer. To where? Another clean cell? They are everywhere, Officer Chen. Holbrook has one. Every prison has one. Buildings settle. Concrete cures. Sometimes it cures wrong. Sometimes it becomes hungry. He unwrapped his bandages. His fingertips were worn down, nails gone, skin abraded. I give what I can give, but soon not enough. Week 3. The camera in B12 started malfunctioning. Not broken, the footage showed the cell perfectly clearly. But Volkov appeared in different positions between frames. Sitting on the bunk in one frame, standing at the wall in the next, back on the bunk in the third, with no transition. The timestamp was continuous, no skipped seconds. He was just moving in ways that shouldn't be possible. Other inmates started complaining about sounds from B12. Grinding sounds, they said, like stone on stone, like something chewing. The decibel meters registered nothing. The cameras showed silence, but every prisoner in B block swore they heard it at night. Grinding, chewing, the cell eating. Week 4. Morning count found Volkov unconscious, lying on the floor, covered in concrete dust. Not regular construction dust. Powder so fine it was almost liquid, coating his skin, his hair, filling his nose and mouth. Medical rushed him to the infirmary. They pumped his stomach. 6 pounds of concrete dust. But unlike the previous victims, Volkov was alive. Barely, but alive. He woke up screaming. Not enough! Offering not enough! Cell takes full payment. Cell takes everything. They kept him in medical for observation. I went to B12. The cell was pristine. Walls scrubbed clean, all of Volkov's symbols erased. Not painted over, erased. The concrete was smooth and perfect, like the day it was poured. His property was gone. His books, clothes, photos, all gone. The cell was empty and waiting. I touched the wall. It was warm. Concrete shouldn't be warm. I pulled my hand back. Where my palm had made contact, the wall was darker, not stained, hungry. I could feel the hunger radiating from the concrete, patient and vast. Volkov never recovered fully. The concrete dust in his lungs caused permanent damage. They transferred him to medical custody, then to a federal facility with better health care. B12 was sealed again, officially this time. Maintenance pending, permanent status. But I started noticing other cells. B19, C7, D23. Too clean, walls too smooth, floors too pristine. I checked the records. Each had a history. Deaths, disappearances. Strange incidents classified as natural causes or inmate. Conflict. The patterns repeated. 9 months empty. New occupant. 4 weeks maximum survival. Then emptying. I requested transfer. Denied. Personnel shortages. Mandatory retention. I filed reports about the clean cells, lost in bureaucracy. I tried to warn new guards during orientation. They looked at me like I'd gone prison crazy. 6 months after Volkov, Administration reopened B12. Budget cuts, overcrowding, need for isolation cells. They assigned it to a new inmate, Marcus Wells. Gang leadership, multiple violent infractions, dangerous, expendable. I watched them put him in, watched the door lock, watched him explore the pristine cell, running his hands along the perfect walls. He didn't have Volkov's knowledge, didn't understand about offerings and agreements. Just saw a clean, quiet cell and thought he'd gotten lucky. I started counting days. Day 1, Wells alive and well. Day 2, same. Day 3, he complained about feeling cold. Day 4, he requested extra blankets, despite 70-degree temperature. Day 5, he stopped eating, said the food tasted like dust. Day 6, medical examined him. No findings. Psychological suggested malingering. Day 7, he started eating the walls. Not metaphorically, actually eating them. Guards found him on camera, mouth pressed against the concrete, chewing, swallowing, jaw working rhythmically. They extracted him. His mouth was full of concrete dust. His teeth were worn down to nubs. He was smiling. "Cell wants to be clean," he said, dust spilling from his lips. "Cell needs to stay clean. Human makes cell dirty. Sweat, skin, breath. Cell cleans itself. Takes back what makes it dirty. I help. I give willingly. Offering." They restrained him. Psychiatric hold. But his stomach was already filling. You could see it distending, swelling with powdered concrete. The doctors tried to pump it. Nothing came out. The dust was compacting, solidifying, turning back into stone inside his body. Marcus Wells died at hour 89 of his occupancy in B12. Cause of death, massive internal calcification. His stomach, intestines, and lungs had turned to concrete. Solid concrete, seamless with no seams or construction layers. His body had been replaced from inside out. They sealed B12 again, welded steel plates over the door, poured concrete in the frame, locked it from both sides with redundant systems. The warden ordered psych evaluations for everyone who'd worked B block. I failed mine intentionally, took medical retirement with full benefits. But before I left, I walked B block one final time. The sealed door to B12 was bulging outward. Not much, just an inch. The steel plates were deforming, bending slowly, concrete pressing from inside. The cell was growing, expanding, getting hungry. I checked the other clean cells. B19, C7, D23, all sealed now, all bulging, all growing. I put my hand on the B12 door. It was warm. I could feel vibration. Not mechanical. Organic, like a heartbeat. Slow and patient. The concrete was alive. Had always been alive. Buildings were just exoskeletons it constructed around itself. Prisons were perfect. Constant supply. Human meat in concrete shells. My hand left a print on the steel door. When I looked back from the corridor exit, the print was darker. The door was absorbing it, eating the residue of my touch. I still dream about B12, about Marcus Wells smiling with dust on his lips, about Dmitry Volkov drawing symbols, trying to negotiate with something that didn't understand negotiation, about Gerald Sawyer and Marcus Odom and Timothy Walsh sitting upright with their hands folded, staring at walls that were eating them from inside. They're building a new wing at Holbrook. Expansion to handle overcrowding. More cells, more concrete. I saw the architectural plans. Cell B12A, cell B12B, cell B12C. They're multiplying it, reproducing the clean cell, growing it like a tumor through the prison. The concrete was poured last month. I drove past the construction site. The new wing is already curing, already smooth, already perfect, already hungry. And somewhere, An inmate is being processed. Dangerous, isolated, expendable. They'll put him in one of the new clean cells. Give it 9 months to settle. Then wonder why he dies sitting upright with concrete in his stomach. The cycle continues. The cells stay clean. The concrete stays hungry. And we keep feeding it because we don't know how to stop. Story 4. The Last Appeal. Jerome Watts was scheduled to die at midnight, and his lawyer wouldn't stop visiting the cell even though there was no appeal left to file. She'd been there every day for 2 weeks, carrying her briefcase full of documents, spending the allotted visitation hours sitting across from Watts, whispering urgently while he nodded and took notes. Standard death row procedure, except for one detail that made my skin crawl. When she left, she was slightly different. Height wrong by an inch. Hair color shifted 1 shade. Voice pitched differently. Small changes that accumulated. I'm Officer Vincent Torres, 9 years working death row at Wexford Correctional. And I'd learned to notice details because details kept you alive. Small changes in routine, shifts in behavior. The tiny wrongness that preceded violence. But this wasn't violence. This was something else. Something worse. The lawyer's name was Rebecca Strand, according to her bar card, state identification, and visitor logs. But each time she visited, her name tag showed subtly different text. Rebecca Strand. Rebecca Strand. Rebecca Strands. Rebecca Strand. Close enough to pass casual inspection, far enough to notice if you were paying attention. I was always paying attention. Watts himself was calm. Too calm for a man with 11 days left to live. He'd exhausted his appeals 3 months ago, clemency denied, execution date set. No hope remaining in any legal sense. But he spent his time writing, filling legal pads with text that wasn't English, wasn't any language I recognized, symbols and curves that hurt to look at for more than a few seconds. Final statement preparation, he told me when I asked. Making sure I get it right. You only get 1 chance to appeal to the highest court. Supreme Court denied your petition. Not that court, higher. He smiled. His teeth were slightly too white, too uniform. Much higher, the court that reviews all final judgments. The court that decides who gets to stay in the official record and who gets erased. Standard death row crazy talk. I logged it and moved on. But Rebecca Strand's visits continued. Day 7 before execution, day 6, day 5. Each visit she emerged slightly more different. Eye color shifting from brown to hazel. Posture straightening by degrees. Her briefcase getting heavier, sagging more each day. When I asked what was in it, she laughed and said, precedent. Day 4 before execution. I checked the visitor log more carefully. Rebecca Strand had been visiting for 47 days, not 14. The records showed continuous daily visits, starting 2 months before the execution date was set. I had no memory of her first 33 visits. Neither did any other guard. The security footage showed her arriving, showed her leaving, showed her in the visitation room with Watts. But none of us remembered seeing her until 2 weeks ago. Memory's flexible, Watts told me that evening. People think time is the river, but memory's the real river. Time just sits still while memory flows around it, reshaping it, changing what happened into what fits the current narrative. He was working on another legal pad, filling it with those impossible symbols. My lawyer's filing a retroactive appeal, arguing that the trial never happened properly, that evidence was tainted, that the conviction should be struck from the record. That's not how appeals work, isn't it? Every appeal argues the past should be different, that what happened in court shouldn't have happened that way, that reality needs correcting. He looked up at me with eyes that reflected the wrong color fluorescent. Rebecca's just more thorough. She's not arguing to a normal court. She's arguing to the mechanism itself, the thing that decides what's real and what gets edited out. Day 3. Rebecca Strand arrived at 9 a.m., left at noon. When she exited, she was 4 inches taller and spoke with a different accent, British instead of American. Her bar card showed the same name, but a different state license. Her briefcase was so heavy she dragged it rather than carried it. I stopped her at security. "I need to inspect your case." "Attorney-client privilege," she said. But she opened it anyway. The briefcase contained paper. Thousands of sheets, compressed impossibly tight, more paper than should have fit in that physical space. I pulled out a handful. Legal documents. Court, filings, motions, appeals. But the case names were wrong. Watts versus reality. Watts versus consensus. Watts versus the state of having happened. The dates were impossible. Filings dated next week. Filings dated 10 years ago that weren't in any official system. Rulings from courts that didn't exist. "He's guilty," I said. "DNA evidence, witnesses, confession. He murdered 3 people in cold blood." "In this version, yes," Rebecca said. Her voice was fully British now, crisp and cold. "But versions are negotiable. Reality isn't carved in stone. It's written in consensus, and consensus can be amended if you file the proper motions with the proper authority. Jerome Watts is appealing his inclusion in the version of reality where he's guilty. The hearing is in 3 days. Midnight, the moment of execution. That's when the judgment comes down. You're insane. No, I'm thorough. There's a difference." She closed her briefcase. The locks clicked with a sound like breaking bone. Jerome Watts hired me to file an appeal to the mechanism that decides what gets remembered and what gets forgotten, what stays in the official record and what gets struck as having never properly occurred. It's an expensive service. Costs more than money. Costs continuity. Costs consistency. Costs small pieces of what used to be true. But he's willing to pay. She left. I watched her walk to her car, watched her shrink back to normal height, watched her hair color shift back toward brown, watched her become more real as she moved away from death row, like distance from Watts allowed her to stabilize. Day 2. I pulled Jerome Watts's case file, read through the evidence again. DNA was solid. Witnesses were credible. Confession was voluntary and recorded, open and shut. He'd killed 3 people during a robbery gone wrong, shown no remorse, fought extradition, burned through 6 lawyers. Guilty beyond any question. But the file was thinner than I remembered. Some pages were missing. Not removed. They'd never been there. The tab marks showed where they should have been. But the paper was gone. Victim statements, forensic analysis, autopsy reports. The structure remained, but the content was being erased. Slowly, piece by piece. I went to Watts's cell. "What is she doing?" "Appealing," he said simply. He'd filled 17 legal pads now, stacked in perfect order on his bunk. Arguing that the trial was fundamentally flawed because it occurred in a version of reality that shouldn't have been allowed to proceed. That my conviction should be struck because the entire timeline where I'm guilty is invalid. That I should be remanded to a different version, one where I didn't do it. "You confessed." "In this version. But there are other versions. Versions where I wasn't there. Versions where the robbery never happened. Versions where those 3 people are still alive." He smiled. The expression didn't fit his face properly. "Rebecca's job is to prove this version is defective. that it should be struck from the official record, that the mechanism should adopt a different version as primary. What mechanism? What the hell are you talking about? The thing that decides what's real, Officer Torres. What do you think holds reality together? Consensus, physics, divine will. He laughed. It's administrative. There's a mechanism, a system, a bureaucracy that files and records and maintains the official version of what happened. And like any bureaucracy, it responds to proper legal procedure. You just need to know where to file. Day 1. Rebecca Strand arrived at dawn. She was 7 feet tall now, her proportions wrong, her face too smooth. Her briefcase scraped concrete when she pulled it, leaving grooves. She spent 12 hours with Watts. When she emerged at 6 p.m., she was barely visible. I could see through her. The walls behind her were more solid than she was. "The appeal is filed," she said. Her voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "The hearing begins in 6 hours. The mechanism will review the case. It will determine which version proceeds. If we win, this timeline gets struck. Jerome Watts will have never been convicted because the version where he committed the crime will be ruled invalid. And if you lose, then he dies at midnight. The execution proceeds. This version remains official record." She smiled. I could see her skull through her translucent skin. "But we won't lose. I've filed 3,000 pages of precedent. I've cited inconsistencies in the evidence. I've demonstrated 47 points where this timeline violates standard causality. I've proven this version is defective and should be replaced with an alternate where Jerome Watts is innocent." She faded completely, just vanished. The space where she'd stood was slightly darker, like her presence had stained reality. I spent the evening reviewing everything. The case file was half gone now. The arrest report was missing. The forensic evidence had contradictory dates. Witness statements no longer matched. The confession recording had audio gaps. The version of events was falling apart, being redacted in real time. 11 p.m., 1 hour before execution. I walked to death row, checking cells, following protocol. The other inmates were quiet. Too quiet. They were watching their walls, all of them, staring at the concrete like something was being projected there. Equations, legal text, documentation scrolling past in languages that shouldn't exist. "The mechanism is reviewing the case," one inmate whispered. "It's checking the evidence, comparing versions, deciding which timeline gets to be real." 11:30 p.m. Jerome Watts was prepared for execution. They'd given him his last meal, steak, lobster, apple pie, which he'd eaten calmly. He'd made his phone call to family. He'd spoken with the chaplain. He was ready. Except he was still writing on legal pads, filling the final pages with those impossible symbols. "Final closing. Arguments," he said. "Making sure I cover every point. The mechanism is very thorough. It checks everything." "You're insane," I told him. "You killed 3 people. You're guilty. No appeal is going to change that." "Guilt is just consensus," he said. "And consensus can be overruled by proper authority. Watch." 11:45 p.m. They walked him to the execution chamber. Standard procedure. He was cooperative. Didn't resist. Let them strap him to the gurney. Let them attach the IV. Let them read the death warrant. The witnesses assembled. The warden prepared the signal. 11:58 p.m. The phone rang. Standard last-minute call. The warden answered. Listened. His face went pale. He hung up slowly. "Execution estate," he said. "Governor's office. New evidence. Case under review." But there was no governor on the line. I'd seen the warden's face. He'd heard something that shouldn't exist. Midnight. Jerome Watts should have died. Instead, the lights went out. All of them. Every light in the prison simultaneously. Emergency backup didn't engage. We stood in perfect darkness for 17 seconds. When the lights returned, the execution chamber was empty. The gurney was there. The straps were fastened. But Jerome Watts was gone. No one had seen him leave. No one had heard anything. The straps were buckled around empty air. I ran to his cell. Empty. His belongings were gone. His legal pads were gone. The cell showed no evidence of occupancy. The logs showed it had been vacant for 9 months. I checked my own notes. My documentation showed 9 months of vacancy. No Jerome Watts. No death row inmate in that cell. I checked the case file. Gone. No arrest, no trial, no conviction, no execution scheduled. The file didn't exist because the case didn't exist because Jerome Watts had never been convicted of murder, because he'd never committed murder, because that version of reality had been struck from the official record. But I remembered. I remembered him clearly. 9 years of housing death row inmates, and I remembered Jerome Watts and his lawyer who changed slightly with each visit, and his appeal to some impossible mechanism that decided what was real. I went to the warden. "Where's Watts?" He looked at me confused. "Who?" "Jerome Watts. Death row. Scheduled for execution tonight." "We didn't have an execution scheduled tonight. Death row is empty. Has been empty for 9 months. Budget cuts. No capital cases processed." He studied my face. "You feeling okay, Torres? You look like you've seen a ghost." I went home. I searched newspaper archives. No robbery, no murders, no arrest. The 3 victims were alive. I found them on social media. They had families, jobs, lives. They'd never died because Jerome Watts had never killed them, because that version of events had been successfully appealed and struck from reality. But I found Jerome Watts too. He was living in Nevada, working construction, no criminal record, clean, innocent. The version where he'd committed murder didn't exist anymore. That timeline had been ruled defective and replaced. I still have my notes. Documentation of his time in death row, records of Rebecca Strand's visits, descriptions of his appeal to the mechanism. But the official records contradict everything. According to reality, none of it happened. Except I remember. And remembering makes it real in some way. Makes it exist in the version of reality that exists only in my head. I'm living in the aftermath of a successful appeal. A timeline where a guilty man retroactively became innocent by arguing his conviction should be struck from the record. I started noticing other appeals. Other lawyers visiting other inmates with briefcases that got heavier each day. Other prisoners writing in symbols that shouldn't exist. They're all appealing, all filing motions to the mechanism, all arguing that the version where they're guilty should be struck and replaced with versions where they're innocent. And sometimes the appeals succeed. I'll remember an inmate, remember his crime, remember his face. Then I'll check the records and find nothing. Empty cell. No case file. No conviction. The mechanism reviewed their appeal and ruled in their favor, and struck them from the official record of having been guilty. Reality is negotiable if you file the proper paperwork with the proper authority. Jerome Watts proved it. He was guilty. He was convicted. He was scheduled to die. Then he appealed to something beyond normal courts, something that maintains the official version of what's real. And he won. I wake up sometimes and wonder if I'm real. If my memories are official record or just defective versions waiting to be struck. If someone's filing an appeal right now, arguing that Officer Vincent Torres shouldn't exist in this version. That I'm an error, a contradiction, something that needs correcting. I check my documentation every morning. Verify my own existence. Make sure I'm still in the official record. Still real. Still allowed to exist in this version. But every day something's slightly different. My badge number shifts, and my assignment changes. My memories contradict the logs. Small alterations. Minor edits. The mechanism revising reality. Correcting errors. Striking defective versions. Jerome Watts filed an appeal to the highest court, the court that decides what's real, and he won. And now I'm living in the version he wanted, the version where he's innocent, the version that was ruled official record. I just hope no one appeals my existence, because if they file the proper paperwork, prove I'm defective, argue that this version of Officer Vincent Torres shouldn't exist, the mechanism might rule in their favor. And then I'll be struck from the record, and no one will remember I was ever real. Story 5. The intake error. The prisoner's wristband said he'd been processed 16 hours ago, but I'd never seen him before in my life, and I'd worked intake at Salton Bay Correctional for 14 years without missing a single shift. His name was listed as Michael Reeves, booking number 82,419, cell assignment F8. The system showed I'd personally processed him yesterday at 2 p.m., fingerprints taken, photograph captured, property logged. My signature was on every form, but I had no memory of any of it. I'm Officer Patricia Duval, and I'd learned to trust my memory because forgetting things in prison gets you killed. Forget an inmate's gang affiliation, you might spark a riot. Forget a medication schedule, someone dies. Forget a face, you let the wrong person through a checkpoint. My memory was sharp. 14 years, 0 incidents. Until Michael Reeves appeared in the system with my signature on his paperwork and absolutely no memory of processing him. I pulled his file. Standard information. Height 5'11", weight 170, brown hair, brown eyes, convicted of breaking and entering, sentenced to 3 years. Previous arrests for trespassing. No violent history, nothing remarkable. Except the photograph showed a face I couldn't quite see clearly. Whenever I tried to focus on his features, my vision slipped sideways. I could see the orange jumpsuit clearly, the ID number, the background wall, but his face was a blur, like someone had smudged the image while it was still wet. I went to F block, found cell 8, empty. The door was locked, the cell was clean, but no inmate occupied it. I checked the digital system, showed Michael Reeves present and accounted for. Checked the physical logbook. My handwriting confirmed he was in cell F8, but the cell was physically empty. Control, this is Duval in F block. I've got a discrepancy. System shows inmate Reeves in F8, but the cell's empty. Negative, Duval. Visual confirmation shows occupant present. Check your angle. I looked again. Empty cell, bare bunk, clean floor, no one there. I pulled up the security camera feed on my tablet. The monitor showed a figure lying on the bunk. Average build, brown hair, wearing orange. The same blur where his face should be. On camera, he was clearly present. With my eyes, the cell was clearly empty. I radioed for backup. Officer Carson arrived within 2 minutes. What's the problem? Tell me what you see in F8. He looked, paused, looked again. Empty cell, why? System says there's an inmate. We checked the camera together. The figure on the bunk was moving now, sitting up, looking directly at the camera. Carson went pale. That's me. That's my face. That's my goddamn face on that inmate. He was right. The figure on the monitor had Carson's features. Exactly his features. But Carson stood next to me. I looked at the cell with my eyes. Still empty. Looked at the monitor. Carson's face staring back from the bunk. looked at Carson standing next to me. His real face was white with shock. "This is some kind of technical glitch," Carson said, but his voice shook. "Camera malfunction. Software error." We went into the cell. Both of us. Nothing there. Just empty space. I reached out, swept my hand through the air where the monitor showed the figure sitting. My hand passed through nothing. But on the monitor, the figure reacted, flinched away, opened its mouth in what looked like a scream, though no sound emerged. Carson backed out of the cell fast. "I'm not doing this. Whatever this is, I'm not doing this." He left, reported to medical with chest pains. I heard later he resigned, took early retirement, moved 3 states away. I stayed. I had to understand. I pulled every record on Michael Reeves. The address listed was a vacant lot. The phone number disconnected. The social security number belonged to someone who died in 1993. His previous arrests showed booking photos from 5 different facilities, and in every photo the face was blurred, unidentifiable. The arresting officers had different names, but I called 2 of them. Both were dead. Traffic accidents, one last year, one 3 months ago. The public defender assigned to his case didn't exist. The name led to an empty office in a building that had been demolished. The court records showed a trial, a conviction, a sentence. But the judge who presided was listed as vacant in the court directory. The case number didn't match any standard format. Michael Reeves shouldn't exist. But he was in my system, with my signature, with my memory gap, with his face that wasn't a face blurred across every record. I went back to F8 that night. Midnight rounds. The cell was still empty to my eyes. The camera still showed an occupant. But now the occupant had my face. Patricia Duval staring out from the monitor, lying on the bunk, looking at me with my own eyes. I stood in front of the cell, stared at empty space. "What are you?" The figure on the monitor mouthed words. No sound, but I could read the lips. "I'm the intake error." "What does that mean?" The figure sat up on the monitor, pointed at me, at itself, at the cell. "You processed me wrong. You let me into the system when I shouldn't exist. Now I'm stuck in the gap between the records and reality. I'm the prisoner who's documented but not real. Present in the system, but absent from physical space. That's impossible. You signed my paperwork. You fingerprinted me. You photographed me. You entered me into the database. But you never saw me. Because I don't exist in a way that can be seen. I exist only in records, only in documentation, only in the gap where bureaucracy creates reality by writing it down." I checked the monitor timestamp. It read 11:47 p.m. I checked my watch. 12:14 a.m. The camera was running 27 minutes behind, not a technical glitch. The time inside F8 was offset from the time outside. Lagging, moving slower. "How long have you been here?" I asked. The figure checked something I couldn't see. 16 hours in system time. 348 days in cell time. Time moves differently when you're not quite real, when you exist only as paperwork. I pulled the processing records. My signature was dated yesterday, but the paper was yellowed. The ink was faded. The forms looked decades old despite being dated less than 24 hours previous. "You're aging the documents," I said. "No. The documents are aging normally. It's just that for me, much more time has passed. I've been in this cell for 348 days. You processed me in yesterday. Both are true because I'm not bound by consistent time. I'm an error. Errors don't follow normal rules. How do I fix this?" The figure on the monitor laughed silently. "You can't. An intake error is permanent once it's been entered into the system. I'll exist in the records forever, occupying cell F8 forever. Never quite real enough to see, but real enough to document. You created me by processing me wrong. Now I'm part of the prison, part of the system, part of the permanent record. I tried deleting his file. Access denied. System locked. I tried removing him from the cell assignment. Command rejected. I tried contacting IT to fix the error. They had no record of Michael Reeves. According to their database, F8 was empty and always had been. But according to my database, the one I access daily, the one I used to manage F block, he was present. Occupant assigned, processing complete. Patricia Duval, supervising officer. I started seeing other intake errors. G12 showed an inmate named Sarah Collins, who'd been processed 3 years ago. I'd supposedly done her intake. No memory of it. The cell appeared empty, but the cameras showed occupant present. Her face was my face on the monitor. H19, James Ortega, processed 5 years ago. My signature. My memory gap. Empty cell. Occupied camera feed. His face was my face. They were multiplying. Every time I checked the system, I found another. Another prisoner I'd supposedly processed but couldn't remember. Another cell that appeared empty but showed occupied on camera. Another face that was my face on the monitor. 14 errors across 7 blocks. All assigned to me. All bearing my signature. All existing only in documentation, visible only on cameras that ran on offset time. I confronted the warden. There's something wrong with the intake system. I'm processing prisoners I can't remember. They're showing up in cells that appear empty. Your processing record is impeccable, the warden said. 14 years, 0 errors. These inmates are properly documented. If you can't see them, that's a personal medical issue. I'm recommending psychiatric evaluation. The evaluation confirmed I was mentally sound. No hallucinations, no delusions. Just a persistent claim that I'd processed prisoners I couldn't remember. The psychiatrist suggested stress, burnout, recommended vacation time. I took 3 days off. When I returned, there were 9 more intake errors. 9 more prisoners in my system that I'd supposedly processed. 9 more cells that appeared empty but showed occupied on offset time cameras. 9 more faces that were my face. F8, G12, H19, and now C4, C17, D9, E3, E21, F14, F32, G8, H7. 23 intake errors, all mine, all dated during shifts I'd worked, all signed in my handwriting, all existing in that gap between documentation and physical reality. The figure in F8 spoke to me through the monitor. You're creating more. Every time you check the system, every time you look for us, every time you try to understand what we are, you create another error. Another prisoner who exists only in records. Another face wearing your face because you're the one documenting us into existence. I didn't create you. You were already in the system. Was I? Or did you create me by noticing I was there? Did I exist before you pulled my file? Or did pulling my file bring me into being? Errors are strange. They exist in the act of being noticed. Before you saw my documentation, I was potential. After you saw it, I became actual. An error made real by observation. I stopped checking the system. Stopped looking for intake errors. But they kept appearing. The numbers grew. 30 errors. 50. 74. Every cell I managed showed an occupant in the system, an empty space in reality, a face wearing my face on the offset time cameras. Other officers started noticing. Duval, why is your block showing full occupancy? Every cell is empty. System error, I said. It's working on it. But IT wasn't working on it. It didn't see any errors. According to them, my block was properly occupied. According to them, I was managing 74 inmates successfully. According to them, everything was normal. I started seeing the errors outside the cameras. Shadows in empty cells, movements in peripheral vision, sounds from unoccupied spaces. They were bleeding through, becoming more real, moving from documentation into physical space. One night, during midnight rounds, I saw one clearly. Cell F8. Michael Reeves standing at the bars, not blurred anymore. Features clear and sharp, wearing my face, identical to me. Down to the name tag, the uniform, the expression. "You've been documenting us for 6 months now," he said. His voice was my voice. 74 errors. 74 prisoners who exist only because you noticed they were in the system. We were potential before. You made us actual. You gave us faces by looking for us. Your face, because you're the one who created us. I want to undo this. You can't undo documentation. It's permanent. We're in the system forever now. Processed, assigned, existing in the gap between what's recorded and what's real. And we're becoming more real every day. Soon we'll be solid enough to touch, solid enough to leave the cells, solid enough to walk among the living prisoners and the living guards, and no one will be able to tell us apart from real people. I requested transfer. Denied. Personnel shortages, mandatory retention. I tried quitting. Resignation rejected. Contract obligations. I was trapped in Salton Bay with 74 errors bearing my face, existing in my block, growing more solid each day. Last week, I processed a new inmate. Standard intake. Fingerprints, photograph, property log. Signed all the forms. Assigned him to J12. When I walked him to the cell, it was empty. The camera showed him present. His face was my face. I'd done it again. Created another error. Processed someone into the gap between documentation and reality. The figure in F8 smiled at me from the monitor. 75 now. You're getting better at this. Soon you'll have a full block. A complete population of errors. All wearing your face. All existing because you documented them. All real enough to replace the actual prisoners. I checked the living population, the real inmates in other blocks. Some of them had started to look familiar. Some of them wore faces I recognized. My face. The errors were spreading, moving beyond my block, infiltrating general population, replacing real prisoners with documented ghosts that wore my features. The warden called me into his office yesterday. "Excellent work, Duval. Your block has the lowest incident rate in the facility. 0 violence, 0 infractions. Perfect behavior from all inmates." "They're not real," I said. "They're documented. That makes them real enough." He smiled. His face was slightly wrong. Features a bit too smooth. Eyes reflecting the wrong color light. "We're all documented here. All processed, all existing in the system. Some of us are just more real than others." I went home last night. Looked in the mirror. My face was blurred. Smudged. Like a photograph that hadn't developed properly. Tried to focus on my features, but my vision slipped sideways. I checked my employee file. Patricia Duval, hired 14 years ago. Perfect record. 0 incidents. But the photograph was blurred. The address led nowhere. The social security number was slightly wrong. I think I'm an intake error too. I think I've always been one. Processed into existence by someone else's paperwork. Documented but not real. Existing in the gap between the records and reality. My signature is on all those forms. But maybe someone else signed them. Maybe the real Patricia Duval processed me incorrectly years ago. Maybe I've been the error all along. I'm going to work today. I'm going to process inmates. I'm going to sign forms. I'm going to create more errors because that's what I am. That's what errors do. We perpetuate ourselves through documentation. We multiply by being noticed. Salton Bay Correctional houses 1,412 inmates, according to official records. According to my count, at least 300 of them are intake errors. And the number grows every day. We're becoming more real while the real prisoners fade. Soon, we'll be the only ones left. The prisoners who exist only in paperwork. The faces that wear other faces. The errors made permanent by documentation. And no one will be able to tell the difference. Because we're all just documentation in the end. All just signatures on forms. All just photographs that might be blurred. All just names in a system that might not remember who we really were. I hope I was real once. I hope Patricia Duval existed before she became an intake error. But I'm not sure anymore. And every day, I become less sure. Every day, I fade a little more. Every day, the documentation becomes more real than the person, until there's nothing left but the paperwork, and a signature that might be mine, and a face that might have been real. Once. Story 6. The segregation protocol. The inmate in solitary confinement was talking to someone who wasn't there, and the conversation was changing the architecture of the prison. Cell S1 was supposed to be 8 by 12 feet. When I measured it this morning, it was 8 by 9. Yesterday, it was 8 by 10. The cell was shrinking 1 foot per day, and the inmate, Marcus Lynn, in for aggravated assault, kept apologizing to the empty space beside him, saying he'd make it stop, saying he'd fix things, just please stop being angry. I'm Officer James Keller, 17 years at Meridian Correctional, 12 of those years working segregation. Solitary confinement breaks people. I'd seen it hundreds of times. The isolation, the silence, the endless hours alone. It destroys minds. Hallucinations are common. Conversations with imaginary people are normal. But imaginary people don't cause walls to physically move. Lynn had been in S1 for 37 days, standard disciplinary segregation for assaulting another inmate. He'd been stable for the first 2 weeks, then started talking to the corner of his cell. Quiet conversations at first, just murmuring, then louder, arguments, negotiations, apologies. The space is too much, he said when I asked what he was doing. He says it's too much space. It makes him uncomfortable. He needs it smaller, more contained. So I'm helping him. I'm making it better. Who's he? Lynn pointed at the empty corner. My cellmate. You put him in here with me. 23 days ago, don't you remember? I didn't. S1 was single occupancy. Segregation meant isolation. No cellmates, no contact. That was the punishment. But I checked the logs anyway. My handwriting, dated 23 days ago. Transferred inmate Samuel Torres to S1 as cellmate for Marcus Lynn, double occupancy approved due to overcrowding. I'd never written that. Samuel Torres didn't exist in our system. We didn't do double occupancy and segregation. That would defeat the entire purpose. But there it was. My handwriting, my signature. Documentation of something that never happened. The cell was 8 by 12 when Torres was supposedly transferred. Today it was 8 by 9. 3 feet of space had vanished. The concrete walls had moved inward, not broken, not reconstructed, moved. The concrete was continuous, seamless, showing no signs of construction or demolition. The cell had simply become smaller. I measured it with a laser device. 8 feet by 9 feet. I measured the exterior corridor. The numbers didn't match. The cell's exterior perimeter showed 8 by 12. The interior showed 8 by 9. 3 feet of space existed in the measurements, but not in physical reality. The cell was smaller on the inside than the outside. Lynn was sitting on his bunk, talking to the empty space that was shrinking. "I know. I'm sorry. I'll make it smaller. Just be patient. The walls are moving as fast as they can. By tomorrow, it'll be 8 by 8. Perfect square. You'll like that better. More balanced, more fair." "There's no one there," I said. "He's right there. Samuel Torres. You processed him. You assigned him here. He's been my cellmate for 23 days. Lynn looked at the empty space with genuine concern. "He's having trouble with the size. Says 8 by 12 is too much space for 2 people. Says it's wasteful. Says we should share smaller. So the walls are helping. They're moving closer, making it right." I pulled every camera angle. S1 showed 1 occupant. Marcus Lynn, alone, always alone. But in the footage from 23 days ago at exactly 3:47 p.m., the camera glitched, 5 frames of static. When it cleared, Lynn was talking to the corner, having a conversation with nothing. And the cell was starting to shrink. I checked the segregation logs. 7 other cells were showing dimensional inconsistencies. S3 was supposed to be 8 by 12, measured at 8 by 11. S7 was 8 by 10. S12 was 8 by 8, all shrinking, all housing inmates who were talking to people who weren't there. The pattern was consistent. Inmates would be placed in segregation. After approximately 2 weeks, they'd start reporting cellmates. Invisible cellmates that only they could see. The logs would show documentation of these transfers, my handwriting, my signature, even though I had no memory of writing them. And the cells would start shrinking 1 foot per day, accommodating the space needs of occupants who didn't exist. S12 housed an inmate named David Park. His cell was now 8 by 8, perfectly square. He seemed content. "Much better," he told me during rounds. "My cellmate likes it this size, says it's fair. 8 feet for him, 8 feet for me, perfectly balanced, no wasted space." "You're alone in here, Park?" "No, sir. Anthony Miller is right here. You transferred him 6 weeks ago. Check your logs." He pointed at empty air. "He's sleeping right now. Please keep your voice down. He needs his rest. Segregation is hard on him. The isolation bothers him." I checked the logs, my handwriting. Transferred inmate Anthony Miller to S12 as cellmate for David Park. Double occupancy approved. Dated 6 weeks ago. Anthony Miller didn't exist. Never existed. But the documentation was there, in my handwriting, recording a transfer that never occurred. And the cell had been shrinking for 6 weeks. 8 by 12, then 8 by 11, then 8 by 10. 1 foot per week until it reached 8 by 8. Perfect square. And then it stopped shrinking, stabilized, as if the space had reached acceptable parameters for its invisible occupant. I started interviewing all segregation inmates. 12 of 14 reported cellmates. Invisible people with names, personalities, preferences. They had detailed histories, conversations, relationships. The inmates knew everything about their cellmates, where they were from, what crimes they'd committed, what they liked to eat, how they slept. Complete biographies of people who didn't exist. And the cells kept shrinking, adjusting, reshaping themselves to accommodate the space requirements of ghosts. S4 was down to 8 by 7. The inmate, Maria Gonzalez, was arguing with her invisible cellmate. "I know it's still too big. I'm sorry. The walls are moving as fast as they can. Maybe tomorrow, maybe 8 by 6. Would that work? Would that be small enough?" I measured S4's exterior. Still 8 by 12 on the outside, 8 by 7 on the inside. 5 feet of space existed in the external measurements, but not in physical reality. The space had been compressed, deleted, removed from existence, while somehow remaining present in the architectural plans. The warden refused to believe me. "Cells don't shrink, Keller. You're measuring wrong. Equipment malfunction. Get maintenance to recalibrate." Maintenance recalibrated the equipment. The measurements remained consistent. S1, 8 by 9 interior, 8 by 12 exterior. S3, 8 by 11 interior, 8 by 12 exterior. The cells were physically smaller inside than their documented dimensions. "It's not possible," the maintenance supervisor said. "But the numbers don't lie. Either the cells are shrinking or space itself is being compressed. Neither makes sense." I went back to Marcus Lynn. His cell was 8 by 8 now. He seemed relieved. "Perfect. Samuel says this is much better. Equal space, fair division. He's happy now. Thank you for letting it happen. Thank you for not stopping the walls. I need you to tell me exactly what Samuel Torres looks like." Lynn described him in detail. Height, weight, build, facial features, scars, tattoos. A complete physical description of someone I'd never seen. I ran it through the database. No matches in our system. No matches in any state correction system. Samuel Torres, as described by Lynn, didn't exist in any official record. But Lynn knew what he'd eaten for breakfast. Knew what time he woke up. Knew what he was thinking about. He's worried about his daughter. She's 12, hasn't visited in 3 weeks. He thinks she's forgetting about him. Thinks the isolation is erasing him from her memory. How does he tell you this? We talk every day, for hours. He's right there. Lynn pointed at empty space. He's worried about you too. Worried you don't understand. Worried you're going to separate us. Please don't separate us. The space is finally right. We're finally balanced. Moving him now would be cruel. I checked the security footage. Lynn talking to nothing, gesturing at empty air, listening to silence, then responding as if carrying on conversation. Hours of one-sided dialogue that he perceived as normal interaction. Except sometimes, for single frames, just one frame in the video feed, there was something. A shadow, a blur, a distortion in the air where Lynn was looking. Not a person, not anything recognizable. Just a space where light bent wrong, where the camera caught something that shouldn't be there. I compiled all the glitch frames, enhanced them, analyzed them. In each cell with an invisible cellmate, there was that same distortion, a space where light didn't work properly, where air looked thicker, where something existed that cameras couldn't properly capture. The psychologist said mass psychosis, segregation-induced hallucinations spreading through shared delusion. They're isolated, but not completely. They hear each other through the walls. They're creating shared mythology, invisible cellmates as coping mechanism. The shrinking cells are measurement error. But measurement error doesn't explain walls moving, doesn't explain 3 feet of space vanishing from physical reality while remaining present in architectural plans. S1 reached 8 by 7. Marcus Lynn was getting concerned. Samuel says it still feels too big. He needs smaller, needs contained. Can it go to 8 by 6? Is that allowed? He's very uncomfortable with extra space. Please, he's asking nicely. He doesn't want to make trouble. What happens if it gets too small? Lynn looked at me, then at the empty space, then back at me. He says if it gets small enough, there won't be room for both of us. He says one of us will have to leave. He says you'll have to choose. Either transfer him out or transfer me out. But the cell needs to reach 8 by 6 first. That's the minimum. That's when the decision happens. S12 reached 8 by 7. David Park was calm. Anthony says 8 by 6 is the target. Says that's when we'll know. Says the cell has to reach proper containment before the protocol completes. Protocol? The segregation protocol. The reason you put us in here together. The reason you're documenting cellmates who don't exist. The reason the cells are shrinking. Park smiled. You're isolating us from reality. Separating us from normal space. Making us small enough to fit in the cracks. That's segregation, isn't it? Not just isolation from other inmates, isolation from existence itself. I ran, found the warden, demanded we transfer all segregation inmates to general population, end the protocol, stop the shrinking. What protocol? There is no protocol. You're having a mental break, Keller. 17 years in segregation has broken you. I'm placing you on medical leave. Mandatory psychiatric evaluation. Return your keys. I refused. Went back to segregation. The cells were shrinking faster now. Visible movement. I watched S1's walls inch inward, concrete flowing like liquid, closing in. Marcus Lynn sat on his bunk, apologizing to the empty space that was getting smaller, promising it would be right soon, promising Samuel wouldn't have to be uncomfortable much longer. By evening, S1 was 8 by 6. Lynn was pressed against the wall, giving the invisible cellmate maximum space. He says it's time now. He says you have to choose. Transfer him or transfer me. One of us leaves. The cell can't get smaller than this. This is minimum occupancy. This is where the protocol completes. I choose you. You stay. Samuel transfers out. Lynn looked at me with something like pity. That's not how it works. Samuel was here first. Samuel has seniority. Samuel gets to stay. I'm the one transferring. He wasn't here first. You were here first. 37 days ago. Alone. Samuel doesn't exist. Check your logs. I checked. My handwriting, dated 60 days ago. Transferred inmate Samuel Torres to S1. Single occupancy, standard segregation. Then, dated 37 days ago, transferred inmate Marcus Lynn to S1 as cellmate for Samuel Torres. Double occupancy approved. The dates had changed. The documentation had rewritten itself. According to the official record, Samuel Torres had been there first. Marcus Lynn was the secondary occupant. The protocol had reversed their order. I don't want to go, Lynn said, but the rules are clear. Samuel stays. I leave. The cell's ready now. 8 by 6. Minimum occupancy. Proper segregation achieved. The wall stopped shrinking. S1 held at 8 by 6. Perfectly still. The space had reached critical dimension. Lynn stood, walked to the center of the cell. Samuel says thank you. Says you've been very helpful. Says the segregation is finally complete. Says I can transfer out now. He vanished. Didn't fade, didn't blur. Just ceased to exist between one instant and the next. The cell was empty. The bunk was undisturbed. No trace of Marcus Lynn remained. I checked the logs. No record of Marcus Lynn. He'd never been processed at Meridian, never existed in our system. The only documentation was for Samuel Torres, occupying S1, serving his sentence in perfect isolation in a cell that was 8 by 6. All 12 segregation inmates vanished over the next 72 hours. Each cell reached 8 by 6. Each inmate transferred out. Each invisible cellmate remained, occupying space that had been compressed to minimum parameters. I'm the only one who remembers they existed. The only one who has documentation proving they were real. Handwritten logs that now show the invisible cellmates were the original occupants. The inmates I remember were the temporary assignments. the ones being segregated from reality itself. The cells are stable now. 8 by 6, occupied according to the system, empty according to my eyes. Except for those single-frame glitches where something is visible. Where the invisible cellmates become partially real. Where space bends around occupants who exist in segregation so complete they've been isolated from normal reality. I work my rounds. I deliver meals to empty cells. I speak to inmates I can't see. I document behavior for prisoners who don't exist in physical space. The warden is pleased. 0 incidents. Perfect compliance. Segregation is working exactly as designed. And sometimes, late at night, I hear them talking. The invisible inmates, having conversations with each other through walls, discussing how long they've been here, wondering if they'll ever be released, wondering if anyone remembers they used to be real. I remember. But my memories contradict the documentation. And in corrections, documentation is reality. The cells are 8 by 6 now. Minimum occupancy, perfect segregation. And the inmates are so isolated, they've been separated from existence itself. Still serving their sentences, still locked in their cells, just no longer present in the world where the rest of us live. I check on them every day. I see nothing. But the logs show they're there, and the logs are never wrong. Story 7. The rotation schedule. The new guards rotated through G Block every 72 hours, and by hours 68, they'd started to look like the inmates they were supervising. Not metaphorically, physically. Their faces would shift, features rearranging, until they were identical to prisoners in their assigned cells. Then they'd vanish during the rotation switch, and actual inmates would emerge wearing guard uniforms, carrying keys, working the next shift as if they'd always been staff. I'm Officer Michael Torres. Or I was Officer Michael Torres when this started. And I've been working Thornhill Maximum Security for 6 years. G Block was the new wing, opened 8 months ago to handle overflow from 6 other facilities. High security, worst offenders, life sentences, and death row. The kind of prisoners you didn't look at wrong unless you wanted problems. The rotation schedule was strict. Guards worked 72-hour shifts in G Block, then rotated out for 72 hours of mandatory leave. No exceptions. The administration said it was to prevent burnout. 3 days on, 3 days off. Constant fresh eyes to maintain security standards. Good policy. Standard practice. Except guards kept disappearing. It started subtle. Officer Ryan McCarthy, day 69 of his rotation. He'd been complaining of headaches. Said the fluorescent lights in G Block hurt his eyes. Said his uniform felt wrong, like it belonged to someone else. Medical cleared him. No fever. Vitals normal. Psych cleared him. No break indicators. But his face looked different. I noticed it first. His nose was slightly wider, his jawline sharper, his eyes set deeper. By day 71, he looked exactly like inmate Gerald Rourke in cell G17. Same nose, same jaw, same deep-set eyes, same scar across the left eyebrow. Identical. I reported it. Supervisor laughed. Stress hallucination, Torres. You've been watching too many inmates. Everyone starts looking the same after a while. Day 72 rotation switch. McCarthy went off duty. Standard procedure. Walked out the front gate. Logged out. Security camera showed him leaving. But when I checked G17, Gerald Rourke was gone. Cell empty. No one had logged a transfer. No documentation. Just empty space where a lifer had been serving his sentence. And on day 73, when the new rotation started, Gerald Rourke was working the guard desk, wearing McCarthy's uniform, carrying McCarthy's ID badge, answering to McCarthy's name. No one questioned it. No one noticed, except the photograph on the badge showed Rourke's face, not McCarthy's. The employee file showed Rourke's fingerprints. The system had rewritten itself. I pulled McCarthy's personnel record. No longer existed. Ryan McCarthy had never been employed at Thornhill. The file I'd seen 6 days ago was gone, replaced with Gerald Rourke's file showing 6 years of employment as a corrections officer. I searched for McCarthy in every database. No social security number, no driver's license, no birth certificate. Ryan McCarthy had been erased from existence, and Gerald Rourke had been rewritten from inmate to guard, filling the space McCarthy left behind. But I remembered McCarthy, remembered his face before it started changing, remembered processing him through orientation 6 years ago, remembered working shifts with him. The memories were clear and solid. But the official record said those memories were false. Said I'd been working with Rourke all along. Officer Sarah Chen, day 66 of her rotation, started looking like inmate Marcus Odom in cell G4. Same transformation, features shifting gradually. By day 71, they were identical. Day 72, rotation switch. She walked out. G4 stood empty. Day 73, Marcus Odom was wearing Chen's uniform, working Chen's assignments, answering to Chen's name. The system showed he'd been employed for 12 years. Sarah Chen no longer existed in any official record. But I remembered her clearly. I started documenting everything, photographs of guards and inmates, comparing features daily, watching for changes. Officer James Keller, day 63. His nose was widening, eyes deepening, jaw sharpening. By day 68, he looked exactly like inmate Dmitry Volkov in cell G23. I showed him the photographs. He couldn't see the resemblance. "That's not my face," he said, looking at a photo from day 63. "This is my face." He pointed at his current reflection. "This is what I've always looked like." "You look exactly like the inmate in G23. I look like myself. You're seeing patterns that aren't there." But his voice had changed too. Slight accent, Eastern European, same accent as Volkov. Day 72, Keller rotated out. G23 emptied. Day 73, Dmitry Volkov was wearing Keller's uniform. The system showed 17 years of employment. I went to the warden. "We're losing guards. They're being replaced by inmates. The rotation schedule is doing something to them." "Personnel records show no missing guards, Torres. Everyone on the roster is accounted for. You're experiencing some kind of recognition disorder. Prosopagnosia, face blindness. Medical will evaluate you." Medical evaluation found nothing wrong. Psychiatric evaluation found nothing wrong. But I was placed on administrative leave. Mandatory rest. Possible stress-induced delusion. Return for re-evaluation in 2 weeks. I refused to leave. Stayed in the parking lot. Watched the rotation switches. Day 72. Officer Linda Marsh walked out. She looked exactly like inmate Teresa Washington from G11. Next shift, Teresa Washington was wearing Marsh's uniform. The security camera footage showed Marsh's face on Washington's body, or Washington's face on Marsh's body. The features had merged so completely, I couldn't tell who was who anymore. I broke back into the facility, accessed G Block during night shift. The inmates were awake, all of them, standing at their cell doors, watching the guards, studying them, learning them. "You're noticing," one inmate said. Cell G8. I didn't know his name anymore. The documentation kept changing. "You're the only one who notices. Everyone else accepts the rotation. Accepts that we're guards now, that the guards are inmates now, that the switch is natural." "What's happening?" The building is digesting us. Guards come in, spend 72 hours. The building studies them, copies them, then releases the copies and keeps the originals. Stores them somewhere, in the walls maybe, in the floors, in the space between the documentation and the reality. We wear their faces, we take their roles. The building needs guards to function, so it creates them from available materials, us. Why? Because that's what G-Block was designed to do. Maintain itself, perpetuate itself, continue operating even when external support fails. The rotation schedule isn't for burnout prevention. It's the feeding schedule. Every 72 hours, fresh guards, fresh material. The building copies them and integrates them. Releases the copies to continue operations. Keeps the originals for processing. Processing into what? The inmate smiled. Go to the basement. Sub-level 3, the records vault. You'll see. I found the stairs. Sub-level 3 wasn't on any map. Wasn't in any architectural plan. But the stairs went down, and down, and down. 3 floors became 6. 6 became 9. The building was deeper than its documentation suggested. Sub-level 3 was concrete and steel. Rows of cells, hundreds of cells, all occupied, all locked. I walked past them. Every cell held a person in a corrections officer uniform, not moving, not breathing, just standing at attention, facing forward, eyes open but unseeing. I found Ryan McCarthy in cell S47, standing perfectly still, wearing his original uniform, face frozen, alive but not living, stored, preserved, kept in stasis while his copy worked upstairs wearing an inmate's stolen identity. Sarah Chen in cell S93, James Keller in cell S117, Linda Marsh in cell S204, all standing at attention, all preserved, all replaced by inmates who wore their faces and lived their documented lives. 347 cells, 347 guards, all stored, all copied, all replaced over the 8 months since G-Block opened. The rotation schedule had fed them into the building. The building had processed them, created replacements, continued operations using the raw material of the people who were supposed to supervise it. I heard footsteps behind me, turned. Officer Michael Torres stood there, wearing my uniform, carrying my keys, wearing my face. "You're not supposed to be down here," he said with my voice. "Sub-level 3 is restricted. You're violating protocol." "I'm Michael Torres," I said. "No, I'm Michael Torres. You were Michael Torres. Past tense. You're currently in your 69th hour of rotation. 3 hours left before switch. Then you'll rotate out and I'll rotate up. I'll take your life, your documentation, your identity. You'll stay down here with the others, stored, preserved, in case the building needs spare parts. I won't let you. You don't have a choice. The rotation schedule is mandatory. No exceptions. You've been in G-Block for 69 hours. The building has studied you, copied you, created me. In 3 hours, the switch happens whether you cooperate or not. The building will process you, store you, release me. And I'll walk out the front gate as Officer Michael Torres, 29 years old, 6 years employed. No one will notice the difference because there is no difference. I'm a perfect copy. He was right. I could feel it happening. My skin felt wrong, too tight, like it belonged to someone else. My uniform hung differently. My memories were getting foggy. Which face was mine? Which voice? Which history? "Who were you before?" I asked. "Inmate Davidson, cell G31, serving life for murder." "But Davidson doesn't exist anymore. I'm Torres now. The building processed him, turned him into you, released you into the world wearing his face, except that didn't happen yet. That happens in 3 hours. Time's flexible down here. Past and future overlap. I'm your replacement and your origin. I'm what you'll become and what you were. I ran, back up the stairs, up and up and up. 9 floors became 6, 6 became 3. I emerged in G block. Guards were staring at me. "Officer Torres, you okay? You look pale." I checked my watch. Hour 71. 1 hour left. I could see my replacement out of the corner of my eye, standing in the shadow of cell G31, wearing my face, waiting for the rotation switch. I tried to leave early. Exit denied. "Rotation schedule is mandatory, Officer Torres. You have 1 hour remaining. Complete your shift." I tried to explain. No one understood. They looked at me with concern, suggested I was experiencing stress, recommended I see medical after rotation. Just 1 more hour, then 3 days off, then back to normal. Hour 72. Rotation switch. I walked toward the exit. My replacement walked toward G block. We passed in the hallway. He smiled with my face. "See you in 3 days," he said with my voice. "Enjoy your time off." I made it to the parking lot, got in my car, drove home. Everything looked wrong. My apartment was slightly different. Furniture rearranged. Photos on the wall showed me, but not me. Same face, different expression, different angle, different person wearing my appearance. My phone rang. Unknown number, I answered. My own voice. "You're done, Torres. I'm in now. I'm you now. The system's been updated. You're no longer employed at Thornhill. Check your records." I checked. Michael Torres, terminated employment 8 months ago. Reason: position eliminated during facility restructuring. I didn't exist as a guard anymore. I drove back to Thornhill. Security stopped me at the gate. "Can I help you, sir?" "I'm Officer Torres. I work here." They checked their system. "No Michael Torres employed at this facility. Sir, you need to leave." I could see him through the fence. My replacement, wearing my uniform, working my shift, living my life. The system had accepted him as real and rejected me as false. The rotation had completed. I'd been processed, replaced, erased from employment records. But I wasn't in sub-level 3. I wasn't stored in a cell. I was out here. Free, which meant the process wasn't complete. I was the error, the glitch, the copy that escaped before being properly stored. I've been watching Thornhill for 3 months now, living out of my car, monitoring the rotation schedule, watching guards change shifts every 72 hours, watching their faces change, watching them become inmates, watching inmates become them. 347 guards in storage. 347 inmates wearing stolen faces. And me. The one who noticed, the one who remembered, the one who escaped before the building could finish processing me. My replacement lives my life, works my shifts, sleeps in my apartment, answers to my name. No one questions it. No one notices. He's a perfect copy. But I'm still here, still watching, still remembering, still counting rotations, still waiting for the building to notice its error, still afraid that any day now I'll be pulled back into sub-level 3, stored in a cell, preserved for spare parts, while some other inmate walks out wearing my face. Because the rotation schedule is mandatory, no exceptions, and I'm 69 hours into a shift that never ends.